Hello all, and welcome to another edition of Low Code Café. This is episode number 164 for July 3rd, 2024. Today we're going to talk about data acquisition and visualization in low code. It's setting us up to do great dashboards using tools like ChartJS. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App, joined capably by Patrick Anderson, Technical Support Manager for Plantain App, and he's the one that keeps me on track. This event, Low Code Cafe, is one we do every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Time, and it's every other week. It's an opportunity for us to update you on what's going on with the product, do some demonstrations, but the biggest piece is always about hands-on low coding, and that's what I'll be doing today. These are all recorded and are out on YouTube, so you can get to them by our YouTube channel, youtube.com/plantainapp. You should always hit the alarm bell so that and subscribe so that you know as soon as we post these. They're actually very good for referring back to. We put a lot of effort into putting chapters in there so that you can get right to the parts that are either you want to review again or if you're trying to learn something new. So our agenda today, I'm going to tell you a few stories from the trenches of support, and then we'll go right on into hands-on low coding. We do hope you'll engage with us, though. If you have a question, you can use the Q&A feature here on Zoom or the chat window. Raise your hand and we'll let you talk. But after it's all over with, there is a feedback form if you want to give us any kind of feedback about what you learned or what we can do better or what we can do next time. As I mentioned, we do this every other week, bi-weekly. So next episode is July 17, and our plan is going to be to do part 2 for this series. So into the trenches of support. This slide says we have nothing. Version 125, which is mostly closed out. We don't expect any more hotfixes to that, and there aren't any today. Version 126, there's a number of hotfixes coming, but they're not ready yet. And so while we've released one previously, there's none today. I would expect an update. Anybody who's using version 126, I would expect that we are going to do a dependency change, which means that when you go into the configuration menu on a 126 system, you'll be asked to upgrade and install all of them. We're not using our normal hotfix mechanism because there's just we have an item that touches every area of the product, and it would just be too difficult to install them as individual hotfixes. So anyone using 126, when you get to when we do that release, and we will let you know if you're using 126, we're going to send an email letting you know exactly when this is going to happen. Then when you see it, it's just simply a one-click upgrade. But as always, we recommend backups before you do upgrades. Since I don't have software to talk about, I will talk about, give you some peek ahead at what's going on in 1.27, our next version. SQL Server 2012, I believe we've mentioned this before, but I just want to make it very clear. It's since July 12, 2022, it got its last end of life. It's no longer getting updates or support from Microsoft. So it's time for us to raise our minimums, and so our new minimum is going to be SQL Server 2016. That's going to be in our next, that version change, that recommendation, that minimum is going to be changed when we release version 127, which should be out in the next month or two. There are upgrade implications for that in that starting in version 127, we're also planning to check what DNN and SQL versions you have installed and make recommendations to you. So for example, if you're running a DNN version higher than what we've tested, we'll just mention that. If you're running one that is lower than we recommend, we'll mention that as well. But for SQL, we're going to enforce the minimum. So if you're running less than SQL 2012, you need to start making a plan to upgrade that. And that just kind of brings us to the last thing I wanted to point out. As a general rule, our versions we support for 1 year. This is not shouldn't be a big hardship on our customers, um, in that you always have access to upgrade to newer versions. And while we're giving you a wide window on when to upgrade, it's necessary that you do upgrade. So that should just be part of your ongoing and general thinking to do upgrades. Happy to address any individual questions you have on that on either the support channel, or if you attend the Low Code Campfire, that's a great place to talk about those minimums and those changes as well. So Low Code Campfire is every Friday of the year except a few, and we're not going to have one this Friday, July 5th. I will be in an undisclosed location and celebrating Independence Day. So, as will Patrick. So we won't be holding one this week. But all the other Fridays, we will do it, and so that's the same hour, 10 a.m. Central Time. Campfire is an open discussion between us and our users. We have lots of people that show up and talk about a wide variety of topics, and this that we just mentioned would be a great one to have. We have some links for this episode, and Patrick has pasted them on the webinar chat. So if you want to get any of those, you can, but you can register in advance for Low Code Campfire. You can get to our YouTube channel, the community portal, which is a great place to post questions. They get answers both from us and from the community. And we're planning a few new things to add to community as well. And so I'll be talking more about that probably in a couple of weeks, a couple of things that we're adding on just to provide a little more visibility. And then the feedback form that I mentioned. So now we jump right on to our hands-on low coding. And so it's all about data acquisition and visualization. Today it's going to be a lot about acquisition because we're going to want to, I mean, the objective where we're going is we want to be able to create compelling charts and graphs so that you can visually understand your data. But there's some best practices that we've found and we want to share about how to put that kind of thing together. And so we'll be focusing today on how to acquire the data and being ready to present it in a dashboard. And that also we want to show about how to do drill downs. And that is something we're going to cover today. So we're not going to get today we're going to get into the black and white. Here's the data, here's how to do drill downs, here's how to prepare for charts and graphs, and then next time we'll actually get into the charts and graphs. So it'll be a two-parter. Just to kind of show you where we're going to go, this is my preparation system, and it's a little bit messy. You'll because I kind of this is one of those show your work things. So we're I'm showing you how we have acquired data that's going to feed, or that does feed, some ChartJS JavaScript. And so this is the data that's going into these charts that you see below. Obviously, when you get past the point where you're developing, these things could be hidden or taken out entirely. But focusing on, again, where we're going to go, this is using some test data. We'll take a look at the test data in a minute, but this is looking at the same test data either by department, by category, or by name. In my let's go ahead and look at the data. It's expense data, and so what we have is just an entity that has an expense date, who spent the money, for what department, what category. They added a description, how much did they spend. So just standard expense report kind of data. This is all make-believe stuff that ChatGPT came up with for me. And so we're representing this graphically. And so when we get to the visual part, it's all the same number. It's a total of $7,073 split out in different ways. So by department, we can see that engineering spent $3,000 for this period. versus sales 1900 versus marketing 2000. Same data split out by category. The smallest category was gifts, and the biggest category was travel and accommodation. And then, who spent what? We've got to talk to Bradley Martinez about all the money that he's spending. Steve and Rachel are doing much better. And then, while I don't have it linked up here now, the where we will be going is that when you see one of these slices and click into it, that we get a drop down, excuse me, a drill down. And so again, backing up, I have this is my show the work. This is the JSON that actually feeds this listing in the same way this is the JSON that feeds this listing. And I've already wired up the if we wanted to pay attention to the category of travel. So we have here category travel is $1,922. I'm simulating a drill down, being able to click in on where is this travel 1900. I'm simulating that I could click here and see a drill down, and so the result of that is that we see the same total with all the details. So now you have the drill down to be able to understand what was behind that chart and to be able to understand it better. Okay, so the last thing that I kind of want to show you before we get started is this. If we go into the dashboard form, we are trying to simplify making the acquisition of data be something that the form doesn't have to do much of, rather than putting your SQL inside of a form. And now if you decide that you want to use that same data in another way, you have to duplicate that. We're doing it by way of a token. So if I look at the, for example, the by department static text has all of the JavaScript necessary to do this ChartJS chart. The key line that I want you to pay attention to is this one. The expense summary JSON is coming from this token that, based on the department and the start date and the end date for this, that we get, this gets us the data. So data is being handled outside of the form and can be consumed by this just in a one statement. By the time we get together next time, I hope to simplify all of the JavaScript that's necessary and to make this very lightweight in here as well. But give me 2 weeks and I'll have that cleaned up. But this is where we're going. So that's our objectives. So I'm going to put that away and start looking at our new empty system, or almost empty system, and do that development. So the first thing, let's take a look at it. So here's our agenda for today. Part 1 and part 2, this is 2 weeks from now, but part 1, we're going to look at that expense data a little bit more. We're going to look at a SQL query that helps us summarize it, and then dive into, okay, how do we do that work in a workflow and turn it into a token so then it's ready to feed right into JavaScript. And then we'll do the low code work of creating a page, creating a filtering form, creating a dashboard form that shows this data and simulates the drill down. And I think we can get to all that in the next 45 minutes. And then the charts will be again next week. So let's dive in. The first thing is our data. So we have an entity, and I've pre-built this. The entity is expense. It shows up on the main menu. It has the custom properties of the expense date, which is the date type. It has a name, the person. the department, the category, description, and amount. For simplicity, I have not used any external references. The actual name of the department or the name of the category is present in the record. As a in a production system, you might want to make those be separate tables, but we're trying to keep this simple for illustration. So that is the entity. I also did an import, and so if we look at, I created a form. This would be something typical that you would do. This is actually, again, a very simple version, but I used AI to create a nice JSON that has all the same fields by the same name, and this is all of our test data. And from a broke my own rule. I didn't name this thing. From a functionality standpoint, we just have two things. We have a field to hold all that JSON. We have a button that says import. The import button simply creates a list from the JSON. And then for every item that's in it, we create a new expense record and populate the record. So this is a very simple import that I did, very quick. Depending on your data, it might be more involved, but just wanted to show that and mention that there are many other episodes of Low Code Cafe where we've walked through doing an import. So I'm going to skip that today. And then taking a look at the data itself, if we go to the expenses data, we've got it's all from a period from January of 2022. Don't know how that one got in there, but 2023 up through the end of 2023. So it's all make-believe data from a year ago. We've got filtering turned on so that we can filter by, for example, marketing. And so now we're only seeing the data from marketing. And so this is the drill down data that we'll get to eventually, but this is the data we have to work with. Good. So next, one of the first tools that we're going to need is how do we summarize that data in a way that we can consume it and output it. And so I'm going to work based on this query, although we'll tinker with it a little bit. And so if we go to our General tab and enable the SQL console, we can do some interactive SQL work. And so I'm going to paste this in here and clean it up. And there's a lot of features built in on this, but let's we're going to summarize. We want to select the department, and we're going to group by department. And we'll go ahead and run this query. Start date. Got a start date and an end date. For simplicity, I'm just going to clear out this where clause for a moment. And I can't spell department. Factors, you're supposed to stop me when I do that. So this requires a little bit of SQL skills or some ChatGPT that where you understand what your data is, what you're trying to do. And so this is giving us a nice unique ID. That's this row number stuff to give us an ID to work with. We have sales, marketing, engineering. So we're totaling up by our department, and then we're getting a total by department. So interestingly, this SQL can also, if we do it in a different way, for example, category is one of our fields. I can actually do it this way. I could copy and paste. That'll be safer. So if I change what I'm looking for and grouping by and run the same query, we get it split out by the category. So gifts, meals, entertainment. And I'm keeping the title of this column generic because that's going to allow us to be generic when we get to the ChartJS stuff, but that's just a brief mention. So then this where clause would let us, for example, put in dates where we can do it between some date and another date. So if we say 1/1/2023 and three, that we get different numbers because it's taking less data. So this is the basis for what we're going to how we're going to query our data. And in the same way, we could do name as a and split it out by who spent during that period. So trying to be very efficient, doing one query that's going to get all of our data. There's a clause here for JSON auto that if we add that to the bottom, we get the same result, but in JSON, which is kind of cool because this is what we need for ChartJS. So with or without that clause, you can manipulate the data, and so that's kind of cool. So this is our base query, and so now the question is, what do we do with it? Well, we're going to do two things. We're going to start with a workflow, and the workflow is going to allow us to send parameters into to say what do we want, what kind of data do we want out from expenses, and then we're going to turn that into a token so that it can be nicely and easily consumed. So I'm going to get my example work up on my other screen so I don't have to think too hard. I can do the same thing here. But this is the base query that we're going to be using. So let's dive in. First thing is a workflow. So we'll do a new workflow that is, I'm going to call it the expense summary JSON. That's what I'm going to get out of it. If I call this workflow, it's going to give me the expense summary JSON. It is going to have a few inputs. So the first input is going to be how do I want to summarize it? Used by. This is going to be a text field, and this is going to be as a description. I'm going to put a reminder to myself that we can do it by department, by category. And for ease of use, I'm going to provide a default here while I'm developing to make sure I get this right and make it easy for myself. The next parameter is the start date. And I'm just going to have a space. I'm just going to do this by text, and I'm going to provide it as a sample date. So again, make it easy to develop. Remind myself how I'm supposed to call that when I'm using it. And end date, same thing. So we have three inputs. The process that we're going to take is that we're going to run a SQL query. Now that same SQL that we were just developing is going to be the basis, and it's just going to have a couple of changes that's going to be kind of cool. So again, same query, but notice that I'm using a token here in the middle of it. We're going to summarize by a field, and we're also going to group by it. It's the same as the input that's coming in. So our SQL is going to adapt based on how we call it. And then we've got this start date and end date parameters, which we do need to pass in. And we could, in the same way as we did it by tokens, we could pass them, but it's this, because it's a field, can't be done by bind tokens. but this can be done by a bind token, so it's a preferred method. So we want to pass in the value that came from the input, start date, into the start date field, which will go here, and then the end date, same thing. So whatever comes in from input is going into the query, and that's going to get us some output. The result that we want is going to go into something called result JSON. It's just a placeholder to hold that stuff so that when we go to the output, we can add an output parameter that is JSON, and so it's going to be named result JSON. We're going to get the value result JSON, and I could provide a nice description here if I wanted to. So this is ready to save and test. Let's give it a try. We've got our test values here, so department and all of 2023. If we run it, we get an error. Cameron summarized by spelled out. So the SQL query is asking for summarized by, and the input just name something slightly different. So I'm going to fix that just so it all lines up. Let's test it again. Okay, now we get all of our information split out by sales, marketing, type. So Spark did it by department. If we go category, it does the same thing by category. Patrick, did you have some help for me?
Nope.
Okay, just thought I heard you wanting to talk. And we can do it by name, and we get it split out by name. So one query, nicely dynamically summarizing your information. This could be done by multiple levels, and that's another thing, but let's document here a little bit better. That's excessive, but just so a nice simple query, and we'll save that. If we go back to where we've done this now, and so now we want to return, we do that same thing as a token. So returning the value of a workflow as a token is pretty straightforward. We just go to tokens, and this is an empty system, so we have no namespace to put a custom token, but I'm going to add a namespace that's going to be called datasets and create it. And we'll add our first token. The token name is going to be called expense summary JSON. It's in the dataset namespace. It doesn't need to have a default value. But what we want to do is to run a workflow. The workflow we want to do is the expense summary JSON. It's nicely named the same thing, so it keeps the confusion level down. What output do we want when we call this token? We want the result JSON. So this is an interesting one. This particular expense data, let's say that this is all historical, and we know it's never gonna, it doesn't change except maybe once a day. So we could put a long cache time on here. If you're calling the same data, we can avoid having to do the same they actually run the query, will just return the same result. So for example, we could say that it's 60 seconds with the global. We could go even longer, but this means anybody who calls it with the same parameters are going to get the same result without having to actually run the query. So let's save and test this thing. When we do, it gives us a nice template for how to, it shows the parameters that workflow is expecting. And so we can say by name for 1/1/2023 through 1/31/2023 and run it, and we get an output. If we and it's doing it by the name of the person. That doesn't give us very much data. So let's say we do through June 30, and now we get lots and lots of data. But it's doing it night, giving us nice JSON data. So this we'll come back to this, but this is the token that we're going to need when we want to display data. All right, where are we? So we've done these two objectives and moving on. So now it's time to actually start doing some low coding. We need a dashboard page that eventually is going to display our nice graphs. But to start with is we're just going to put the black and white in place as I referred to it earlier. So this is going to be our dashboard page. We can do that here in Pages. This is the root of the site, and I'm going to put the dashboard right on the top. So I'm going to call it dashboard, and I'm going to use the same thing for the title so that it'll be nice and abbreviated. Only our users can see it. We don't want to reveal our expense data to the world, so not checking all users is probably a good thing. And then who can edit this page? We'll go with low code engineers can make changes to this. You're going to see a thing from us in near term. Admins and citizen developers are roles that we were anticipated when we rolled out Plant an App quite a while ago. We're defocusing admins and citizen developers. The low code engineers are the people, are us, the people who are developing these things. And so they're the ones we're going to give rights to edit the page. And so I'll save that. As a result of that, if I now go to my site and refresh, we have a dashboard page. Dashboard page is empty. And so this is our blank slate for developing. So the first thing that we need is a filtering form. We want to be able to get the options having to do with the dates and being able to apply that filter. So we'll build a filter form here. Putting the page into edit mode, and I like to clean things up. This empty HTML that I don't need, I'm going to get rid of it. So now we have a completely empty page. And I'm going to pick an action form is going to be great for doing filtering. And so we'll drop it on there. We use the manage form button the first time. I always recommend that. The way to edit a form after it's been initialized is over here under this pencil icon. But again, I recommend that you use this the first time. This will help you make sure you get our standard defaults. So we're going to do a blank form. That sets it up pretty much the way we need it. I'll make a couple of changes. First, we'll give it a name. It's the filter form. And I like my labels on the top. And that's a default I think we're headed towards as well. The filter form is going to have just two fields, the start date and the end date. These are date and time fields, actually date fields. I'm going to use a date picker. If we did date and time, if we needed to focus in on what time the expense happened, that would be possible, but that's not our use case. So we'll just say date picker, and this is going to be called start date, which gives us field name of start date. And the initialization of this, well, let's do, yeah, I'm going to do the initialization. So the initial value I want to have for this is pretty simple, but let's explain it. We want to get it from the command, from the query string. So there's going to be the same, if the query string is provided with a start date, then that's the value that we're going to get. But if there is no value, I want to default it. So that's what this part is. It's just going to default to our first date that we care about. Again, this is Your mileage may vary. You may want to do something different than that. But this is going to help us just easily have a start date. The minimum date, again, because of our example, will provide the minimum date that we're doing is 1/1/2023, 12/31/2023. So this is our start date. We can use the clone feature to help us build along the end date. So we can do date and uncheck auto here so that it generates the ID as well, end date. The end date that we want is the same thing. Want it to come from the query string, just call it end date, and the value is 12/31/2023. These values are the same. So this gives us a nice start to our filtering, and let's save that, take a look at it. And we can close the editing so we can just see it. So it's not laid out very nicely, but if we click into it, we get a calendar. But note that I can't type on it, so I don't like that. I want to be able to type my date or pick it from the calendar. So we'll do some more work. So let's open the filter form in a new page so I can do some work on it. So those two changes. First of all, we're going to allow input on both the end date and the start date. And then in the layout, I'm going to make these be a couple of, put them on the left side of the screen here, so that should make it look nicer. So we just refresh. Yeah, so now we got that, and we can type a date. And we can type a date, or we can pick it. So that's good shape. The next thing that we're going to want to do is a button that says filter, because when they click this, we are going to put these up on the query string, and that's going to trigger everything else that's on the page is going to know our dates. So we will put in a button. And we'll call our button the apply filter button. So it's a button, filter. When it does it, what do we want to happen? Well, on the on-click handler here, what we want it to do is to redirect to a portal page. So let's say redirect to portal page. The page we're going to pick is actually our same page that we have, the dashboard page. The query string that we're going to want to do is that we want it to put the start dates that were selected into the query string. So it's going to pass a start date of whatever the start date from the form is, and the end date and personal preference, I like to uncheck this box so that it keeps it as nice parameters instead of trying to embed it into the query string. But either way, it will work. And because I do this redirect, it's actually going to force the page to refresh. And so let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to refresh the page. I get my apply filter button here. Notice the query string to start with is empty. If I say apply filter, now the start date, it's been encoded up there, but it's there, and the end date is up there. And now if I change these and apply it, the dates are going to change up here too, and then when the form initializes, it pulls it from the query string. So it makes it all be very sticky. I'm just doing that through the query string. I'm going to do one last thing here, which is similar. This let's go back to our form, and I just want to initialize it with those dates so that there's always a date up in the query string. So this same action that we did a minute ago, I'm going to export it and hack it up a little bit by going to events and say on our pre-init, I'm going to put that same event. And then what we're going to do is if these fields are blank, so if the get start date is D, or if get end date is D, then we want this thing to execute. And what we're going to do is go to this same page and provide the defaults automatically. So it's really hard coded. And I'm just going to do, well, this will be an interesting test. 1/1/2023. So it's providing this stuff automatically. So now if we browse to this page without any URL, it starts with empty, but then it redirects and now it gets refreshed with dates. Interestingly, it didn't encode those, but I think it's it all works the same way. Any questions so far? Feel free to throw those out. Patrick will raise my attention to them. But we now have a filtering form. From a layout perspective, I don't want to take up space with that filtering button being on a different spot. So we'll move that, but other than that, it's ready to go. So we've got our filtering form and our options are all on the command line. And so now we're ready to go into a dashboard. And what we're going to do with the dashboard form is to start with, again, we're focusing on black and white here. So we just want to get our stuff on the form so that we can see that we're successfully getting data and then go from there. So we're going to put my filtering form away and we'll add a new dashboard form here. Yeah, manage it the first time and say blank form. And this is going to be our dashboard form. And I'm going to save and go back and close out of edit mode. The form is invisible so far because we haven't put anything into it, but we can edit it now in, if we're using Page Builder, we get this nice tool. If not, you'd have to put it into edit mode and use the icon I showed you a little bit ago. But I'm going to open the dashboard form in a new page so that we can do some development. So the development that I want to do is to start showing these things that we, and I'm just going to show them as data. So I'm going to throw some large text here on the screen, meaning a large text field, and it's going to be called department data. And the value that I'm going to put into it is going to be based on this token that we came up with that I guess I don't have up on the screen anymore, so I'll regenerate it. So if we just run this token, we're going to get, here's the template of it. I don't like to type, so we'll do that. So the initial value of this field is going to be the dataset's expense summary, and we got to fill in the blanks. Well, we're going to summarize by department. That's the what we're doing in this particular example. The start date is going to be from the command line of get start date. And the end date is going to be off the, I say command line, the query string. Yeah, end date. And we don't need take up quite so much screen space, so we reduce that a little bit and save it. So that now we have department data showing up. So based on these dates, we're getting department data. So it's running our token, that's running our workflow, that's getting data from SQL. If I change this to June 1st, I would expect the totals to change. So ah, a wider period, not a smaller period. Let's try again. Yeah, so the totals change depending on where you do it. Again, I'll do a little bit of layout stuff. I don't like that very much. So we'll say that we're going to have top labels. And from a layout perspective, we're going to make it be, let's say, 3 columns wide out of the 12 so that we get a nicer layout. The department data we'll be able to display all this stuff. So you can see using that token, very easy to get the data to be displayed. So let's do that for our other things just so that we can prove that they work. So we're going to have, we can just copy this, clone it, and the next one is going to be category data. So we'll do data, and we're going to do the same thing except category and clone again. This is going to be name data. Bear in mind, all this is doing is just proving that it works. We don't even really need these on here, but it's just, I like to do step by step and see that things are working before I go on to the next thing. And then from a layout perspective, we'll just do the similar. We'll do this as 3 columns, and this is 6 since it has a lot more data. But let me save and do the refresh. And so now, same query, different fields. So this one is doing it by name, and this is so department category name. All that's working as we would hope. So we've got our filtered and summarized data, right? We should probably prove if we pick this as June or January 1, for example, that we get much, well, no data there. We need to encompass the month, but we get totally different data depending on what we select for the filtering. So the filtering's working, the JSON is working. We've got nice filtered and summarized data. So now the last thing that we'll try and get done today is simulating a drill down. The idea is that we want to be able to go from here to click and pop up a listing that shows just the information, the detail information behind this summarized information. To do that, we could potentially use the listing that's already been generated for us from expenses, but I'm going to generate one. I like for this kind of purpose to be able to generate one that's dedicated to the purpose and doesn't get changed in the future as we work with it on the entities model. So I like a solid target here. So and what we're going to use is the embed feature of Plankton app, which says that we can put a listing on this page from somewhere else. So we've got to give it the somewhere else. So I'm going to go to our pages and build a somewhere else. On our dashboard page, I'm going to add a transactions page. And so the actions, and for now, and we'll do the same permissions that we had earlier, but for now, I am going to leave it visible in the menu just to make it easy to navigate to. So with that and a refresh, we now have a dashboard transactions page that we can build that listing, and that's what we're going to do. So this requires putting a listing on the page. It's an action grid is the name of our module that does that. We'll drop it on here. Again, cleaning up, I didn't need this extra thing on the page, HTML module. And again, you want to use the proceed to the settings screen button to initialize it for the first time. This is going to ask us what kind of data source we want. It always starts out there, and we want our data to come from expenses. And so we've got some things to fill out. What's the we want to put this in order by ID. I guess we could put it in order by amount or by expense date. It really depends on what you want to do, but I'm just going to put it in order by ID that's ascending just so that it has some kind of order. For speed, I'm going to do a little copy paste development here. I'm going to add a where clause that says we only want to show things that is where the expense date is greater than or equal to the start date and it's less than or equal to the end date. And so now we'll fill in some, bind those parameters in. So the start date parameter is going to come from the query string as well. The start, it's going to come from the query string and it's going to default to January 1st, 2023. The end date is the same way. Now it's kind of important to provide these defaults when you're developing, because if you don't, this and this initial development, there won't be any values up on the query string, and the result will be an error in your SQL. It's just because these fields are blank, so providing defaults makes that happen. Actually, since 2023, it doesn't matter, but we've got to have some kind of defaults here. So now when we save, it was able to run the query and it doesn't error out, so that's a good thing. We can move on. I'm going to rename this listing the transactions listing. It's always good to name things. Don't use our names, use yours. And we need some fields to display. What details do we want to show when somebody drills down? Well, the date of the expense, the name, department, category, description, the amount. We'll show the ID also. So all these things can be added to the display. I'm going to put the name first and then department. Category, we'll do description. I'm going to put expense date kind of last, and the amount, the ID. Okay, so we've got all of our fields in nice order. And then we're going to do some settings on all of these. Leaving the ID sortable, we don't need to filter it. We can search by it, that's fine. The expense date is the same. The amount, we're going to want to be able to sort it and search it, so that's fine. But the description, this is kind of important. Nope, not description. This is, again, searchable and sortable. But once we get to category, it's important that it be filterable, because we're going to use the filtering mechanism to link it to the drill down. So that's fine. The department is also needs to be filterable. That's, again, how we're going to link it, and the name as well. There's one more thing I want to look at here. It's probably useful on we'll save that so things collapse. Our work is saved, but the expense date, probably nice to have. We'll format that as a date and put it as a short date just so it doesn't take up a lot of space or try to show a time for us. So, and then one more setting, and this one I'm going to call out as pretty important. We want to turn on sync with URL so that it's going to be paying attention to the query string for us and give us some hints as we do some development. All right, with all that done, let's see what we get. We've basically reproduced what we had a little while ago. We have all the details, and we can filter by name and department and category. And then the piece that's going to be useful to us is that if we want to filter in, for example, on where the expenses for marketing come from, we can click it, but notice that we get a this gives us the HTML that we're going to need, the query string that we're going to need to be able to trigger this listing to do that. I did forget there's one more setting that's important, and that is that on the settings in the oh, that's the wrong thing. That's the dashboard form. We're not. We'll be coming back there, but we're building our transactions. In the transactions listing, there's one more thing that's important. In the settings of it, we want to be able to embed this. So under Advanced UI, clicking the Embed button turns on the ability to use something like this to embed this information into another page. So I'm going to turn that on and save it so that this grid can be consumed from elsewhere. All right, let's put that aside and go elsewhere. The place that we want to consume this is in the dashboard, and so we've got our dashboard and our dashboard form open here in these two tabs. We want to be able to display something like the marketing total. That can be done with a button, and so we go into our fields of our form and we'll add a button. The button will be something like second. We'll call it a drill down button. And the technique that we're going to do, the on click for that, is going to be a redirect to URL. And remember, I put something on the clipboard here, this big long whatever. Well, this to start with isn't a URL; it's a script. So this is the embed information. But if you start getting all the way out here, there is an embed URL all the way to the right, and that's really what we need for this purpose. So I'm going to get rid of all of that and just use the URL, and we'll have to go and find the end of the URL where the quotes occur. There. And so we just get the URL. This is going to make it where when you click the button, it's going to go to that spot. We're going to open it in a pop-up. We're going to call it our transactions. We're going to see all the transactions because we haven't passed any data yet inside this URL, but at least it'll, again, in our step-by-step development, it'll show that we're actually able to do a drill down. So when we click drill down, we get our transactions, we get all of them. And so with very quickly, just to kind of demonstrate that this can work, we're going to want to focus in on our department of marketing. So again, we have this URL that will allow us to do that if we pass it along. So in our dashboard form, drill down button, if we were to dynamically pass some information here, where we say if we add that the filter department is marketing, it's automatically going to do that for us. So now when we click the button, this drop down is only showing us marketing stuff because it has activated the marketing drop down. And the last thing that we'll do quickly here is in the same button, we'll pass the dates. So now it's showing that we can drill down into dates. So we're going to have to pass the start date equals date query string, date equals So now we're passing start date, end date, and what's necessary to get it to filter by department, all with one click. Again, we don't want to do that dynamically, but this is just a proof of concept here. So now this should give us, if we filter on January 31, 2023 and apply the filter, that's too little. We don't, let's do February. Get it. February 28th. All right, now we have some marketing. It's $66.90. If we do our drill down, we get marketing filtered down to the date in question, $66.90. So proof of concept that drill down can happen. And that is our hour. I will be happy to hang for a question if there are any, but if not, we will make a plan to, now that we have all this wired together, we've acquired our data, we've got a way to drill down and see the data, that if we just present it nicely and wire in the clicks, so that when you click on a pie slice, it shows you the data that's behind it, we'll be good to go, and we'll be certainly able to take care of that in our next session. So that's the plan. Thanks for hanging with us, and we hope to see you again in 2 weeks for the next episode of Low Code Cafe. Happy low coding.